Welcome to today's Mastering Hydrozone Irrigation workshop that we have together. Again, my name is Andrea Washko. I'm here with High Country Conservation Center. I'm just going to go quickly through our agenda for the day. We'll just do a quick introductions of the participants, housekeeping, and then we'll move into why we're all here to learn about hydrozones. So we'll just do a quick introduction on that topic, and then we'll dive into the details of the do's, don'ts, what to consider when setting up hydrozones. And then towards the end, we will have a little review with a little quiz component so you can test your knowledge. And then we will have some time allocated for Q&A with our partners here in Irrigation Analysis. And then we'll conclude everything towards the end. Just a couple of housekeeping notes for everyone. All participants are automatically muted. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function that is found on your toolbar at the top of your screen. If you just don't mind writing your questions down, we will be able to receive them on our end. And then once we go into the Q&A sections, we'll bring up those questions up. If we do not get your questions addressed on this webinar, we will have those questions saved and we'll be able to answer them in a post email. Again, we may have some resources that we will share along during the presentation. We will be putting those up on the chat function so you can access the links that we're speaking about during the course of the presentation. And then the last item that I would like to note is today's webinar is considered or qualifies as a QUEL continued education unit. Again, for reference, if you are QUEL certified and you want to maintain your QUEL certifications, one way to do so is by obtaining 2 QUEL CEUs. So this one will be able to act as one of them for you. Quick introductions again. My name is Andre. I'm the Office of Program Coordinator here at HC3. My colleague Rachel Zarowin, our Community Programs Director, is also going to be helping us on the chat and Q&A section. And then our good friends of Bob Howie and Doug Smith from Irrigation Analysis will be leading the presentation. I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves when we dive into the conversation. But just for the sake of time and our late start, I would like to move this along. And again, just to set the tone, I know we're all here to learn more about hydrozones, but the reason why HC3 and our friends at Irrigation Analysis is the world is changing one way or another, and so is our climate. And I just really like this fact of for every 2 degrees in Fahrenheit rise, and the average temperature stream flow will be reduced by 9% or around 9%. It seems like here in Summit County, we have all the water we can possibly need, but the reality is that is not the case, and definitely not the case for the people lower on the waterways from us. So everything we can do to conserve water here is a team effort, and that's why we're going to be one of the reasons why we're putting on this workshop. And again, as an organization, we've kind of targeted outdoor water use as being a way we can make an impactful change in this near future here in Summit County and our neighboring mountain communities. Around 50% of water we use outdoors is lost to inefficient irrigation. And with cost of waters rising, what can we do? We can choose more efficient irrigation, and we can design for our climate. And I think hydrozones is going to be a wonderful topic to kind of hit those 2 means of tackling our water conservation efforts here. So with that, I would love to bring, I think, Bob, you're starting us off for Irrigation Analysis for the presentation.
Nope, you get me.
Oh, great. Great. We got the main act starting up. Beautiful. Well, great. Well, we'll start with our webinar objectives, Doug.
Very good. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. So what do we want to cover today? What's the objective here? Well, we want to go through and figure out, what are hydrozones and why do they matter and why they are important and so forth. So we have the different sections as the bullet points show. What do they look like? We have some plant lists that we're going to cover a little bit. Selection, how do you place those? Where do you place them? So forth. Do's and don'ts. So there's there's kind of a list of what to do and what not to do to give you good hydrozoning. There are a lot of mixed hydrozones, and as we kind of define what that means, and then we'll figure out why it's not necessarily a good thing and how we can kind of correct that. And then how should your irrigation manager, work with mixed hydrozones or separate those? And so what can we do once, if we have a mixed hydrozone?
Doug, I'm going to quickly interrupt because I forgot to ask one thing from our attendees is we will have a poll up, just a couple of questions. If you just don't mind filling that out during the course of the presentation, preferably in the next couple of minutes. That way we have more information to make sure we have the right webinars and future resources for participants here. I'm sorry to interrupt, Doug. I'll move on.
No, you're fine. It's all good.
That poll should be live on your screens right now. It looks like we have one person participating. So as we get more folks jumping in, fantastic. We see answers coming through. So once I get a few more, we'll end the poll. You still got a little bit of time. So I know it's some reading. Take a look at those polls and let us know what you think, because your answers help us provide content for you in the future. And it just helps us serve you better. So thank you guys for participating. Oh, here we go. We're coming in with some more answers. I'll give it maybe another 30 seconds. So keep them coming.
While we're waiting, if we have another glitch in the powers that be, the internet or power or whatever, we're going to keep trying to keep going. We'll probably put it out there and make sure on the chat you guys are still with us if power goes out or the internet goes down again. But Doug and I are in a different location, so I think we're maybe we can keep it going if we do get to that situation.
Thank you,
Bob. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. Now's your last chance. This is your 5-second warning. I'm going to get in there and oh, good. Oh, wow. Okay, we got a couple more. The 5-second warning worked. Okay, so just a second, we're going to show you guys your answers here so you can see what's going on. So the biggest barrier you anticipate in getting clients and properties, the financial investment. That's a big one. HC3 is working on grants to help people do that. So it's good information for us to have. And it looks like we have a mix of what resources are most helpful. So we'll continue to do workshops, and hopefully next year we can host an in-person one. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it off.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. All right. So what is a hydrozone? And I'm going to just read this as it's typed there, because this is the actual definition from Quell of what a hydrozone is. So Quell defines a hydrozone as a group of plants with the same water use classification and microclimate assigned to a single irrigation valve. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So it's all about the plants that we're watering and how we're watering those with an irrigation system. So everything that we talk about today is going to revolve around that definition. Andre? All right, so this, sorry for the low resolution on this, but this is just kind of a quick aerial view of what some hydrozones may look like. So you see, like in the top right, there's a vegetable garden, so it would be its own hydrozone. Below and next to that, we have a higher water lawn, which may be like a bluegrass type of turf. That's a high water use, so we'd want to separate that. And then we've got a low water use lawn in the front. There's two different low water perennial and shrub beds, but one is kind of to the south side and the other is kind of on the west side, depending on how those are oriented and the size and shape of the house and so forth. Those may be separate. So if the microclimates are very similar and the plant material is very similar, we could actually consider that one hydrozone. But if they're different and there's a lot of different shade or slope or something like that, we would want to divide those up and make those separate hydrozones. Again, a hydrozone is just an area where you'd have turf versus shrubs versus native, etc., and then zone them up for irrigation. So here's a couple of photographs. The one in the top left kind of shows you a nice little shrub perennial bed that's would be considered its own hydrozone. So we're not trying to put a row of irrigation behind there, spraying over that, and then watering that lawn because it's cheaper and easier to install when this is brand new or whatever the case may be. We really want to divide that out because it does have a different water requirement. Also, because it's so tall, it would be difficult to get the spray pattern uniformly to that turf area that's just to the right of those flowers there. So those should be your different zones or hydrozones in that case. The bottom right one is just a nice, kind of a, I don't want to use the word xeriscape, but xeriscape, shrub bed type native plants, kind of moderately sparsely spaced. So you'd have your own zone here. With most likely some subsurface drip irrigation or point source drip irrigation to irrigate those. So that would be classified as its own hydrozone. Here's another image of some local hydrozones in Frisco. Same kind of thing. So you have some nice perennials there and a shrub bed going up along the stairs. Again, that would be on its own zone. And you notice that there is quite a bit of elevation difference in this one. And so elevation could play a difference or a factor in what those zones are. So if you had another shrub bed up, near the side of the house, that maybe the microclimate may be similar, but the elevation is going to be different. And why that matters on a drip zone is because when that station shuts off, all the water is going to leak out the emitters to the lower part. So you're actually going to be providing a lot more water to the low plants, the lower plants than the upper plants. So just another consideration there. And then off to the right, you can see that there's a little native area. There's some, maybe some trees back there in the native area. And if your native is not going to be irrigated all year round, you might want to have a different tree zone. So that would be considered a hydrozone for trees. So they would have their own maybe drip rings or something like that on a separate zone. And then that would actually be considered a hydrozone in a hydrozone. So just, separating out what needs to be watered and how often and so forth. All right, so again, groupings of plants based on their similar water needs. And here's some of the factors to consider. So the plant water use classification, we've gone through the 4 or 5. I think there's 5 in where we're at up here. So we've got 5 plant water use classifications. We'll cover that in a little bit. Specific microclimates. Again, sun, is it on the north side of the building? Is it on the south side? Is it windier on one side or the other? Do you have a lot of heat? Because a lot of times if your zone is next to a street or a driveway, which can warm up with the sun and it actually bakes that area. So you may have a heat factor, humidity, north facing, etc. So southern would have a lot more sun. So we want to separate those as those microclimates. Root depth is also another issue. We want to know how deep the roots are because that directly impacts how much water is available to the plant through the soil reservoir. Slope, again, that's kind of like that with that elevation. Slope and elevation kind of go together there. So if you have a steep slope and large elevation changes, try to separate those so that the zones are kind of on that same elevation level within a couple feet if possible. Soil types and amount of organic material. Again, that kind of goes with the root depth, and your soil type will determine how much water is available and how much water it can hold. So if we have a sandy side and another side has been amended with some peat or something like that, and so all of a sudden your soil type is a little bit different, it holds water differently, you need to take that into consideration and possibly consider that a separate hydrozone. And then finally, the irrigation emission devices. So that just means your sprinkler heads or your emitters or wherever the water is coming out. We're trying to get the precipitation rates to match what the kind of that soil type is for the infiltration rates and that slope, and then also consistent through that hydrozone. So other things to consider, what kind of plants are going in there? When we plant a new landscape, generally they're going to be, a number 1 or a number 5 size container. Well, those are going to grow. And what are they going to look like when they're big? So if you have some plants that may grow large, then how do we get water to those root zones in those hydrozones? So if we have a drip emitter that's setting, right next to the stem of a plant, well, where does that go in 2 or 3 or 4 years? I mean, do we go out there and add more? Most likely, because that plant, once it grows, is going to require more water. So it's kind of a moving target with that hydrozone, because its water use is actually increasing as that plant grows. Functionality, what are we using it for? Again, if we have a bunch of tall trees that we're trying to block wind or something like that, maybe again, it's on its own hydrozone. Is there a pollinator habitat? That's a good one. If you have certain flowers that attract pollinators, we want to keep that on a different hydrozone and so forth. I think native. They're hardy, they're proven, they grow on natural rainfall mostly. Sometimes they don't get the rainfall, and then we need a little supplemental irrigation. But that's the whole point with native, is that they can typically thrive in rainfall that is natural. Growth rate and invasiveness. So bringing in fast growing or invasive species is not usually recommended, but it depends on what it is. Sometimes you want that if it's a ground cover and you want to be able to fill in an area quick. So again, how do you zone that, hydrozone that? And then also there's regulations. So depending on where you're at, and if you're in the valley here, different plant selections would probably be better than plants that come from out of state or something like that may not do so well in our area. All right, this is an example of the town of Breckenridge's plant list, and I'm going to turn this part over to Bob. He has a lot more experience with the plants and has done a lot of work with Breckenridge on this. So, Bob.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, so we worked with the town of Breckenridge and created a lower water use plant list, which you all will be able to access. As it says at the bottom there, that will be shared via post-webinar email. So if you're interested, you'll get it in your inbox. But it's broken out by grasses and ground covers, perennials, shrubs, evergreen shrubs, and trees. And there's some examples of those plants in there. I see a few little typos, but that's pretty normal when you get into some of those words and some of the Latin, but don't worry about that. I think the plant list has those pretty cleaned up. But anyway, we worked with those on with the town of Breckenridge, and again, it says lower water use. So in most cases, once established, the plants on the list will not need a lot of additional water, maybe no additional water in some cases. Still should apply. This is talking about the plant material as it relates to hydrozones. So these plants should all be pretty cohesive together and to be good to put on the same hydrozone. But it also is you still need to consider the microclimates. You think of, say, a red twig dogwood. A red twig dogwood in full sun is going to be need a lot more water than a red twig dogwood in full shade. So that kind of example. But anyway, there is a local resource here with a list of plant material that you can use. You may find some new selections, new ideas there. Then it can be a little challenging to find these plants sometimes in the trade, but they are out there. And kind of can, especially in the off season, maybe try to hunt some of these things down and figure out some plants that you want to use and can use. And you can see kind of, again, that plant list key kind of talks about native things are listed, but it also then a primary kind of, the natives and the primary plants on that list would be kind of the first go-tos. And then the secondary list are other plants that, are nice to bring some diversity into the landscape and to utilize those. So anyway, it's a great resource. We worked on that with the town, like I said, and you guys probably have the first look at it here as being part of this webinar. So look for that. And if you have any questions, let us know. The only other thing I said is, in talking to the town of Breckenridge, whenever you put out a list like this, people are going to go like, that doesn't work. That doesn't grow here type thing. Kind of, I guess, it may not grow in all locations, of course. And again, that's back to the microclimate, but look, there's probably some new ideas for you here, if nothing else. And then there's certain things that you might go like, I don't really like that plant. It's like, that's fine. Don't worry about it. You can actually email me directly if you want to have a little more plant chat. And if you kind of strongly disagree with some of these, I'd love to hear it. Or if you strongly love the list. So anyway, thanks very much. On we go.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I just want to mention too that in the chat function, we have put a link to that list. So if someone is interested in accessing it now, you can do so then. And then also at the end of the presentation, we will have additional links, including some, CSU extension resources that will hopefully be just a nice asset for your resource book. So for the sake of time, let's continue to move on. We don't have any pressing questions for Q&A right now, so we're just going to move on from this. We will have another session at the end of this presentation, so if you come up with any questions, please continue to just put them in the Q&A function. Thank you.
All right, moving on. So the proper way to landscape and irrigate. When we have a new landscape, we have the opportunity to if we're working with a landscape architect or a designer or something like that, they're usually pretty in tune to hydrozones and their plant palettes and what they're going to use in areas, and to group those areas together. So right from the get-go, from the design stage, it's nice to have hydrozones on a planting plan or a landscape plan. Then the irrigation person can look at that plan and determine how they're going to irrigate it. So that is kind of a checklist, a check mark for a lot of the water providers. A lot of the municipalities have people on staff that will review plans and then kind of look at the plans to make sure that the hydrozones are separated and so forth, because it's so important for water conservation. Excuse me, the ordinances have specific hydrozone amounts or limits, so meaning that you may have a cap on how much high water use plant material you can use based on the site, or how much native grass you need to install and so forth. So, and then with the square footage of all those, you can determine what your water budgets are and how much water that landscape should use. The new landscape designs and irrigation systems must meet rigid standards and requirements, meaning that a lot of the municipalities have a certain DU or distribution uniformity that the system has to meet before they'll sign off on it. So, it's up to the designers to start with an irrigation system that is designed to be efficient, and then also the contractor that's installing it. So, as you've taken a 2D plan and taken it to a 3D world, it's going to change. So, with those changes, you just have to make sure that the modifications match the installation of the system so that we don't end up with a mixed hydrozone inadvertently. All right, better landscape designs, whether required or not. There is not really a lot of requirements depending on where you're at. Some municipalities do have a lot of requirements, and you just have to make sure that you meet all those check mark boxes. But the most water efficient and best way to install a landscape is to group the plants with the same water requirements, as we said already, and then make sure that the irrigation matches that specific hydrozone. So how do we want to water that hydrozone? If it's a turf grass, we probably are going to use some sort of a rotary head or a high efficiency nozzle, or overhead irrigation, some sort. If it's a shrub bed, generally we use drip, a drip zone or a subsurface drip zone. Sometimes we may install like a micro spray. So if we use one of those, that's kind of what we want to stick with, that same type of irrigation in that hydrozone. All right, so consider the plant factors. So which plants need the most water? So this is kind of a list of the highest water use plants. And then this is also would be, your hydrozones. So if you have an annual flower bed, those tend to take a lot of water, as do vegetable gardens. Cool season turf grass, we all know how thirsty that is. So we're always trying to reduce the amount of cool season turf grass, especially turf grass that's not in usable areas. So if it's just if it's just in an area where it's aesthetic and not really used for anything, maybe we could change that to a different type of native turf or native grass that looks good, but nobody is in there playing ball in it or anything like that. So we'd use less water and still look good. High water use shrubs, then you have the moderate and low water use shrubs and perennials as well. And then the lowest is the native grass. And some shrubs would also kind of be in that low water to native area. So, but mostly your native grasses, we have an irrigation system that's installed when the project is new, and that's really only for germination and establishment. And then generally those zones are turned off or backed off a lot, and then let that native grass just kind of take hold and grow on its own. So here's an example of the Colorado Mountain Town plant water use classification. So you can see that there's the 5 categories. Cool season turf is a 0.9. And if we recall, what does that mean, the 0.9 and the 0.8, so forth? That is our multiplier based on our reference ET. So if everybody's taken the Quell class, we know what the ET means. And so we're just trying to say, here's how much of that ET, our reference ET, that we need to adjust for those 5 different classifications. And here is the Eagle River Water and Sanitation's classification. They have 4. And if you notice, the cool season turf here is a factor of 1 versus on the previous screen, it was 0.9. So it's all kind of relative to where you're at and what that plant factor is, but that just gives us kind of a target of what to use. So in this one, we're saying our plant factor is 1, so we're not adjusting that ET from that reference. So that's a high water use plant material. That's kind of what we're trying to manage a little bit better. This image right here, some of you may have seen this one already in some of the presentations, but this is a really kind of a cool way to look at water requirements through the valley. So going east to west, we start at Vale, kind of in the higher and in that darker green area. And if you look at our chart on the left side there, that's got greater than 19 inches, and this is annual, so 19 inches of ET or water requirement, and I'm assuming that would be for turf grass. But as you go west, you can see that those shades kind of change, and as we go to a lower elevation, less trees and things like that, a little higher or hotter rather. And so if we get all the way over to Eagle, all of a sudden we're kind of on the far western slope, and it's very kind of it's a lot hotter and so forth. But if you look at the amount of water it takes, it goes from 19 to over 28 inches of water a year. So just in that short area, really, there's a lot of different water use, or ET, I guess it would be. And when you're looking at like the Front Range, it's not quite that drastic. So if you could go from Colorado Springs all the way up to Fort Collins, it's kind of similar along the Front Range. But when you get into the valleys like this, every 5 miles makes a big difference of that ET and the water use requirement for sure.
Those are, Doug, going to butt in a little bit. Yeah. So go back to that, Andre. That and the plant water requirements we were looking at just ahead of that these are like an Eagle River that Eagle River Water and Sanitation uses these to calculate, basically create water budgets based on the plant factors and the kind of zone in the valley there. And then, they kind of apply rates accordingly. So if people are exceeding their, kind of what their budget, water budget, then the rates are significantly higher. That's the kind of simple, short version of that. But, again, this kind of thing too, like this map, in Summit County, is probably going to be a little more uniform compared to the Eagle River area, Vail Valley, but it still is going to, as Doug said, there's going to be, you're going to have differences, up Valley and Breckenridge to like the far end of the county going out towards Kremling. It's a lot drier, warmer down there. so similar kind of thing, but probably not quite as drastic as this in Summit County. But all these are considerations when you're trying to figure out how much to water. So thanks.
Right, thanks, Bob. And so here's another way to kind of look at the different water requirements for different plants. So again, you have the 4 different colors. High, the orange one would be the bluegrass, high water use, thirsty plant material. And then as you can see, and you're probably fully aware, but they go in, starting your irrigation system at the beginning of the season in May, it's still cooler, your ET is not as high. And as we go through the summertime, we hit June and July are our hottest months, and then we start to taper back down August, September, and then October, we're probably done irrigating. So, but if you look at those bars, again, your native grasses are going to have far less water requirements than the shrubs and of course the bluegrass. So that's kind of what it looks like, kind of a bell curve, and that's pretty normal everywhere. Wherever you go, it's cooler in winter and hotter in the summer. So the hydrozoning, the do's and don'ts. Bob, do you want to take the? Do you want to go from here for a minute and do the do's?
Yeah, that's good. These lists kind of go on and on if you wanted to, but these were some of the top do's and don'ts for hydrozoning. So and they kind of bounce back and forth. So do use the right plant in the right place. I don't. You probably have all heard that talked about. Right plant, right place for that plant to be successful, and definitely for it to match the hydrozone of plants around it. So be thoughtful in plant selections. Don't just kind of go, oh, that's a nice plant, or even for that matter, kind of steer your clients, your customers, or your bosses accordingly to kind of like, hey, this is the best way, the right way to do this. Let's put plants together that need the same amount of water and given their kind of microclimates as well. The don't is mix plants with different water requirements together. Pretty simple, but it takes a little knowledge and understanding to do that. I think it's we'll talk about this in a bit too, but I mean if there's a couple of the wrong plants in the hydrozone, like plants that like to be dry or in a wet area mixed with wet plants, or vice versa, plants that like to be wet or in a dry area, or higher water use versus lower water use. It's like, think seriously about taking those plants out of their wrong hydrozone, otherwise, matching wrong hydrozone, and get your plants separated. So, move the high water use plants together, kind of like that Frisco example. They group their perennials, their flowers, their, more, colorful things, high impact, high value area to the home, focal point. And then, when they get away from that, they have, lower water use plant material, and not having the two in the same place together. So consider the microclimate factors affecting plant water need. And again, even the same site, shrubs on the shady north side of a home, very different water demand than same or similar shrubs that might be on the hot, dry south side of the home. And yeah, you need to have two separate zones to do that. You can't just have them on the same zone, but probably the plant in the hot, dry is maybe needing double or triple the amount of water, microclimate situation. So, and don't ignore microclimate factors within the landscape. So think about what you're dealing with. This, especially when you're doing installations, and even, I'd kind of, hopefully the designer of the landscape and of the irrigation separately usually, but hopefully each of them are taking that into account when they design their areas. But when it comes time to installation, you all can kind of speak up and go like, these zones need to be separated, and so that we can water this properly and efficiently, and not use excessive amounts of water and not kill plant material by too much or too little water. So it's not too late at the installation, or as you go to installation, or even when you're looking at a plan to say, hey, why are we doing this here, and let's kind of change this up a little bit. Another one is plant whatever, whenever, wherever I should say. Just not thinking about it, like, know which plants like and need more water, and which plants like and prefer less water, and again, group those together. And I think, as kind of you would think too, but just bias towards lower water use plant material when possible. I think that's kind of just will be the long-term best answer. So using lower water use, you can do your whole site in low water use plant material. You don't have to have high water use, turf or flower beds or whatever. You may want them, of course, and may be really what is appropriate, but in a certain spot. But look at trying to use mostly or all lower water use plant material. So do separate irrigation stations and valves from each hydrozone. And yes, that may mean you have to have more zones. So that's, I think, what happens a lot of times is contractors, especially, but clients, try to, it's like, hey, we can just put these together on the same zone. It's like, that's kind of starts to be where, things go awry. So yes, it's one more zone, one more valve. It's, there's a little more work there in a good way, in a bad way, but so again, don't irrigate all plants and areas the same, even if it's cheaper and easier. So kind of fight against that whenever possible. So yeah. All right. So efficient irrigation considerations, a few of these are underlined. So properly programmed weather-based controllers can go a long way to efficiently irrigate each hydrozone and to make it much easier to manage. So again, especially if you are starting a project or it's a new project, hopefully y'all have worked with some of those now. They should be either on the Wi-Fi at the home or property, and or you have it linked up via cell service. The Wi-Fi, of course, you don't have to pay for, so that's kind of nice, but you do have to, somebody has to let you access their Wi-Fi. But anyway, that's really the, shall we say, the gold standard and the right way to install and efficiently manage an irrigation system. And then still, if your controller's based in a program based on each separate hydrozone, then, it will be water efficient, but also make your life a lot easier to manage, and even can manage it remotely, as you know. So use drip irrigation with the indicator heads when possible. Limit overhead irrigation when possible, especially in windy areas. Separate irrigation for trees and shrubs in native areas. Have that be separate, I should say. And kind of was an example in that Frisco picture. We didn't really, couldn't see it really well, but again, they had planted trees and shrubs into their native lawn, native turf areas, and had drip to each of those. And that was creating separate hydrozones very well. So good way to do it. Don't mix head types that have different precipitation rates. So, and we see this a lot when we're doing our irrigation audits. And what's going to happen is one area is just going to be very wet, overly wet, and another area is going to be very dry on the same irrigation zone. Again, you guys that are doing this day in, day out understand that and know that. But again, it's like, we need to try to kind of clean that up where possible. Being, I guess, realistic about it, there are times when it's like, if you're very intentional and you really know how much water you're putting out and are kind of, we'll say, playing with your heads and your nozzles and emitters and things, then on one zone, then maybe you can do some of that. But in general, if you have a micro spray zone, that should be a micro spray zone. If you have a drip zone, it should be a drip zone. If you have a spray zone, it should be a spray zone, and not a combination with a rotor zone. So another one we see a lot is we see a lot of high efficiency nozzles in combination with traditional spray nozzles on the same zone. And again, you guys have been in the class, but very different precipitation rates. We do really advocate and like the high efficiency spray nozzles, and can really help deliver water more consistently and uniformly. It helps improve your DU, as we talked about in the class. But yeah, it's having those in combination. And even if you really have all your systems, like the entire site is all over, switched over to high efficiency nozzles, just makes it much easier to manage. They do typically need to run a little longer, counterintuitive, but they're going to put out water more uniformly. So you won't be overwatering or having to overwater to get everything adequately watered. So again, don't try to not, like, we see sites where they're same zone pops up. There's, on the right side of the turf is high efficiency nozzles, left side's traditional nozzles. And so that's a no-no, or just having, from head to head, the nozzles are all different. And then the same thing on, you want match precipitation. Again, that's kind of what you're going for. But the same one as we see, it's just nice to have the whole site on the same kinds of nozzles. And then you kind of have a pretty good idea how long you need to be running things. And not this kind of weird hodgepodge thing. So don't mix head types with different precipitation rates. Make sure the water stream or spray is not blocked or obstructed by plants. Use 6-inch pop-up sprays, especially whenever possible, especially on new installations. Just gets your heads higher up and above the plant material. Really, the other thing is, at least once a year, should go through with, be turning on your zones and taking clippers, loppers, pruners, whatever out, and pruning plant material back so that, that the sprays are properly covering, the areas they're supposed to water. And that's something that I really see as a weak point. We see a lot of plant obstruction when we do our audits. And, you want, again, water to be getting to all your areas as uniformly. So think about that. Microspray zones with adjustable flows are a great tool, especially in tighter areas. You can, I don't know if y'all have used those, but they're really, really nice because you can turn them up, turn them down, turn them off, and to throw more water, throw less water. So I think it'd be great to see more use of microsprays, easy to add. If you got a dry spot, you can easily, drier area, you can easily add one. So try to implement microspray zones, especially if you have a lot of smaller perennials and smaller plants you're trying to irrigate. Program the controller to run each separate zone based on that hydrozone for its unique amount of time needed. We don't program all zones the same regardless of plant material and microtype and irrigation equipment. So we just see, again, in field experience, lots of, like, say, large rotor heads are, it doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter if they're on a slope. It doesn't matter if it's full sun. Doesn't matter if it's full shade. Doesn't matter the plant material. It's just like, oh, you run those for 30 minutes or whatever, or 20 minutes. It's like, and then, so all the rotors on that system get programmed the same, or on that site get programmed the same as all your other sites. But it's like, well, stop and think, be a little more professional, I would say, and look at what kind of situation you have. If it's cool, then, you don't need to water it as much. If it's dry, then water it less. So I'm going to jump onto this. So deep and less frequent irrigation, you all probably heard this, is better than light waterings. It will encourage deeper root growth, get more air and water into the root zone, and expands the soil reservoir. So those plants are going deeper, or as deep as they can, to get water out of the soil. And that's what you get when you water deeply and less frequently. So we see a lot of, again, in the mountain communities, a lot of, 5, 6, 7 day a week watering, and that's old school and not necessary. So I would only exclusion might be annual flowers, and maybe a vegetable garden type situation can take quite a bit of water and need kind of a daily dose. So anyway, and shallow root zone too. Regular system checks and maintenance, programming adjustments, and overall management of plants and irrigation for each hydrozone is essential. You can't just set it and forget it or neglect it. Your hydrozones will kind of fall apart and break down. Things won't be working the way that you thought they were, or they were at one time. So just that maintaining it is really critical, but you got to check and see and just make sure everything's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So hydrozones and plants and landscapes do change and evolve over time. And that's another thing we're seeing more and more. Sites that, are 10, 20, 30 or more years old, things have changed. They're shady now. Before they were full sun, a lot of small plants, especially on a, younger site, newer site. But, you roll the clock forward or calendar forward, and all of a sudden those, areas are not the same as they once were. Things have grown up and things have died out. And so you need to adapt and rework both the landscape, but also the irrigation system to kind of meet that, so that the hydrozones, on a given zone or just a given valve, oftentimes change. So we've looked at a lot of sites, especially mountain communities this year, where we've seen a lot of, this was 30-year-old system, and it's not holding up very well, or plants have grown and are blocking things. So got to kind of adapt, and probably, like I said on there, every 10 to 20 years need to look at doing some changes. So what is a mixed hydrozone, and how and why do they happen? So mixed hydrozone, by definition, has plants with different water requirements and or has different water or microclimates on the same zone or station. So pretty straightforward. It can be one or both of those factors. The plants and or the microclimates are different, but they're all coming on, all on one specific valve or station. A common example is a lawn and shrub bed irrigated by the same irrigation valve or station, since both of these have significantly different water needs. So that's a big kind of red flag and no-no. If you see that, it's kind of like, all right, we're either not watering the lawn as much as it really needs, or we're overwatering the shrubs, or vice versa. We're overwatering the shrubs and the lawn's getting what it needs. So trying to have those separate, pretty straightforward, but and sometimes that's just what you get handed, and you got to try to figure out how to make the best of it. Other examples would be stations with annuals, turf and shrubs together on the same zone. We see that quite a bit. And stations that irrigate both turf and native areas, where it's like, don't need to be irrigating those, the same way and as much, and even look at potentially, in that case, maybe shutting off the native zones. Having plants with similar other examples would be, another example, plant with similar requirements on the same zone or same valve. Some may be planted in full sun at different microclimates, some planted in shade, very different water requirements. The result of mixed hydrozones is some plants get overwatered, over-irrigated, they then become, and some are under-irrigated one way or the other. Sometimes of those plants are going to win, some are going to lose. They're going to be less attractive and less healthy. And that extra water that you're pouring on to keep the higher water use, plants going is not beneficial, and because not all the plants need it, that water is being wasted and lost. So next, just flash through these. After mixed hydrozones happen due to after the fact changes or additions to the landscape, like installing a new flower bed or shrub bed where there wasn't before, or adding new plants with different water requirements into existing bed. Sometimes it comes about from changing the irrigation system, and changing up your head types. Ignorance is one of the reasons that this occurs. People designing or installing don't know about hydrozones, which, if they're professional, they have been educated and experienced, they should know. And then they get the issue of not caring, kind of being apathetic, lazy, or just not paying attention. So need to be part of the solution. And if you're kind of have a question and you're trying to figure it out, ask or seek assistance. We're happy to answer questions or talk to the designers, or the installers and designers communicating back and forth is really great when that can happen. So, and again, that can kind of get fouled up. I mean, it could be a bad design, hopefully not, of irrigation or landscape is going to create a mixed hydrozone situation, but it also can be the installer or even the customer, for that matter, says, oh, I don't like that. I want to do this. And it's like, I have a better way. And it's like, if the better way is putting us in a mixed hydrozone situation, you're not part of the solution. You're part of the problem. So just think about that. Cutting corners, we see that a lot, where clients want to do or get something done cheaper. That you get what you pay for. It's gonna be cheaper today, but it's gonna be worse over time. We're gonna use more water, and plants aren't going to do as well because you've created mixed hydrozones when you got an option to not do that. So it takes a little more work and a little more cost to install these separate hydrozones, but it's worth it. So yeah, we talked about just a minute ago, mixed head types is also kind of violating the hydrozone principle. It's the same as having mixed plant types together. I'm going to skip down on some of these. The bottom there, we need to not mix head types and devices on the same valve, and that shouldn't be needed anyway, if plant hydrozones are being followed. And then I guess the point right above the solution there too, making corrections. If you see this out there, replace, like when we see a stray rotor head or heads on a otherwise spray valve, it's like, well, fix it. change that out, or add another head, potentially, but keep it all the same, keep it all spray, or vice versa. If you have a spray or head or two on a rotor zone, easy to fix, and it goes a long way towards making that a much more water efficient and similar hydrozone and being better able to irrigate it. So next. So can you fix mixed hydrozones? Again, like we talked about, it's best to start out from day one when it goes designed and when it goes in the ground, that the hydrozones are separated, like the earlier graphic we had. That's the way that systems should be built and designed and installed. But it can be fairly easy sometimes to fix these hydrozone problems, but other times, it can be like that, like everything is wrong. Got a mixture of plant material, you got a mixture of irrigation emission types, micro sprays, drip, rotors, all in the same sprays, all in the same zone, or 2 or 3 of those in the same zone. That's usually fixable. But also a lot of times it's point is on that slide in the middle there is think about adding valves, but also capping off, moving and or adding heads, extending lines. There's ways to kind of work with what you've got to try to bring back or to try to make separate your hydrozones. So definitely can be done, and it can be pretty involved. I mean, if it's just totally like a mess, shall we say, it may be most sense to start over, but that's a pretty big mountain to climb, I understand. So, but if the landscape's getting tired, the irrigation's tired, things are mixed together and it's just kind of a mess, maybe now's the time to separate those hydrozones and to go down a new path. So again, I'm not going to stick too long on these, kind of talked about a lot of that, but just it depends on the situations. There's a lot of easy fixes that can be made that are pretty cost effective to do. And each site's different. So just knowing about these things, knowing about plant material, considering microclimates, and then also the irrigation, types of irrigation, thinking about those, how do those relate to the amount of water I'm putting out in this area on this valve, is how to think rightly about hydrozones and how to be more efficient and appropriate in your water use. So
great. Bob, I would love to chime in, and we did get a question come through the chat that I think is very appropriate right now. Someone was wondering in a how irrigation analysis would approach a situation where they have a preferred what is your preferred drip equipment or choice or emission device for flower beds that have a mixed plant water requirements? So that there's an existing Yeah.
I'll let Doug have that easy question.
Okay.
I tried to type it out in the questions, but really, so what you could do would be to, move emitters around, or if it's a shrub bed where you have high plant material, high water use plant material, and low water use plant material on the same zone, you're not going to separate those plants because it's obviously not practical. But what you could do would be to change the emitters. So you would add maybe more emitters of the same flow rates to the shrubs that need more water, or you could even change the emitters to a higher flow rate. I mean, it's kind of a customized system. So you just really have to know which emitters you're putting in on which plants and so forth, so that if someone else takes over the maintenance on that, generally people aren't going to look at flow rates of emitters. So you're pretty dialed in if you're saying that I got this shrub that's suffering because it's not getting enough water. And if I program it so that it does, the other ones are getting too much. So it's kind of a balance, and you can certainly customize that system based on flow rates and the number of emitters and then the placements of them. So
Great.
you can kind of.
Thank you so much. One last question that did pop up in the chat, maybe a quick answer would be, could you remind us what exactly an indicator head is?
Right. Yep. So an indicator head, it attaches to the drip zone pipe, and all it does is it pops up it looks like a pop-up sprinkler, only the riser that comes out is usually bright yellow or bright orange. And there's no water that comes out of it. All it does is it lets you know when that drip emitter or that drip zone is on. And especially if it's a larger project where your drip zone might go into 4, 5, or 6 different beds, when you turn on a drip zone, sometimes it's very hard to find, which islands or areas that drip zone is operating. So the indicator head lets you know that, hey, the pressure is on here and it's working. So other things that it could help with would be root pinch. So if you know your 2 beds are on the same zone and the first one is popping up and the second one's not, you most likely have a root pinch and the pressure is not getting there to pop it up. So it's really just a visual that helps you identify what zone that is actually pressurized and working. Very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. For the sake of time, I am aware that we just passed 10 o'clock for the attendees. If you don't mind staying for 5 more minutes, we would just love to wrap it up, share the resources. If you do have additional questions, please email them to us and we'll get back to you. If you don't mind, we would love to just get this pop quiz going. Again, it should take you only maybe a minute or 2 to fill out, and that way we can just see if there's any kind of final questions that will come from that. So Rachel, if you don't mind sharing the pop quiz really quick. Again, this information is not being recorded or anything. This is just an opportunity for you to kind of test your knowledge on the topics that were discussed today.
Thanks. Yeah, so this should be live on your screen right now. You're not going to get a grade. Nobody's going to see your answers. I'm not going to share this one. But we will, if you have time to hang with us, we will go over the answers to all these questions. So take a look, answer what you think, plug them in there, and then we'll go through all the questions and answers if you do have time. If you don't have time, recognize that. I'm going to go ahead and put an email in the chat where you can ask any follow-up questions. And thanks for your patience today as we dealt with some startup issues thanks to power outages.
Yeah.
So I'll leave this poll up here. I'll leave this poll.
Yeah, Rachel, thank you so much for putting that poll up. I'm actually going to go ahead and just kind of share some concluding remarks, just in case people do need to leave, ASAP. Again, thank you all for coming. I really think Hydrozones is a wonderful approach to tackle and water conservation efforts and build resiliency in our water landscape here in Colorado, especially in the high Rockies. Again, if you are not Quell certified and look or know someone on your staff or team that would be interested, there are upcoming opportunities. There is a Quell training in Aspen on the 17th of September, as well as in Castle Rock on September 30th. Again, very valuable class. I would highly recommend it. And then, once you maintain your certification, once you obtain it, you will be able to maintain it as the years go on by either conducting assessments, visiting trade shows, or joining us in classes like this and workshops that qualify as a CEU. Just other resources for you to know is HC3 works on a Water Smart program where we offer irrigation assessments for not only residential house landscapes, but also for commercial ones. So if you have any clients that would be interested, we do have resources to help with those investments. And then obviously we all need great soil amendments, and just want to plug in one that we have in our local community here. It's a CTA certified compost up at the local landfill, part of the scrap facility. Again, there's just one pricing, but it's available year round, and another great local resource. Again, we'll send you an email with a bunch of other links. And then again, in our end of webinar email that we'll send out, we'll have all our contact information. So please reach out to us directly if you want to chat about plants, about our water programs, or just want to ask any follow-up questions. We will be also sending out a webinar email with a survey. That way it just allows us to know how to set up our best future webinars. Everyone that participates will have a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card as a thank you for your participation. It is only one gift card. I do have to make that point. So it is going to be a random draw. So again, those are just our concluding remarks. Thank you again for joining us. And now that the poll we've had some time to answer our pop quiz, whoever's around, we would love to kind of go through these and just explain the answers for you. Bob, Doug, would you want to go through the pop quiz?
You or me, Doug, or want to go back and forth?
Yeah, whichever way. Let's see here. Yeah, go ahead, Bob. I was reading some of the chat. Sorry.
Okay. So what is a hydrozone? It's all of the above, kind of fitting the definition. It's a group of plants with the same water requirement. Not a small microclimate, the same microclimate, and a single irrigation station or valve. That's a hydrozone. So group of plants with this same water requirement in a similar microclimate and on one irrigation zone. So which is better, high or low water use plants? That's a little bit of a trick question. I mean, both are good. And it depends on their place in the landscape, really, and really what's needed in those places. Again, that get into non-essential turf and things like that. We don't need turf wall to wall, and let's be more focused and more water smart. And when possible, favor lower water use plants and have the largest areas of the landscape to be made up of those kinds of plants, lower water use plants. It's more the Colorado ethos and approach, and more as water supplies get tighter. Which is the best way to irrigate? Kind of hit that pretty well, pretty straightforward. Again, we're trying to fill up the soil reservoir, shallow. If you water lightly and infrequently, the plants don't have to work very hard. Sometimes if you're overwatering lightly and frequently, they'll basically be only a half-inch deep in some lawn areas and things, just because they know they're going to get water again, and they will drown if they go any deeper. They won't have any air to work with and provide that to the plant. So, but deep and infrequent, fill up the soil reservoir, encourage and maximize plant root growth and overall plant health. So mixed hydrozones are good, true or false? Hopefully by now, absolutely false.
That's all we need to know. We can move on.
Go, Doug, your turn. There we go.
Okay. Is it a valve that has both spray and rotor heads a mixed hydrozone? Yes or no? Yes, it is considered a mixed hydrozone. They typically have different precipitation rates. Okay, so that's yes. What is the best way not to have a mixed hydrozone? Start with the good landscape and irrigation design and installation, and make sure they're separate. Is it easy to fix a mixed hydrozone? And it depends. It just depends on how bad it is. And sometimes it's easy you can put it in a different valve. 2-wire systems help that a lot. Is it easy to fix an irrigation zone with mixed head types? Yes, it can be. There's a lot of different things that you can use now to fix uniformity and change that and get an irrigation zone back to normal. And should all turf zones, shrub zones, and all native zones be programmed to operate the same amount? No, absolutely not. You all got that.
Great.
One more.
Great. So I think this is a natural place to start wrapping up our presentation today. Again, thank you all for your patience with that technical difficulties at the beginning, but I think we got the majority of our major points across. Doug and Bob, again, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge on hydrozones. And again, High Country Conservation Center, Irrigation Analysis. We're here to assist you. So if you have any questions in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out. Starting the next year, we will have, irrigation season kicking off. So please, follow up with us and we'll let you know what events, what workshops we'll be putting together, what programs, rebates we may have available for your customers. So again, we are here for the community. We're helped to reach our water goals all together. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I think we have all those opportunities outlined. And again, just want to stress the assistance with the survey. It really allows us to understand how to set up the next workshop to meet what you're looking for. And we have a deadline for September 17th for that survey to be concluded. So again, thank you all, and let's have a wonderful Tuesday day.
Go to the Quell website to submit your CEUs. It's pretty easy. So
thank you so much for catching that. Yes, you just go on, you list out this name. We've had verification from their organization, and this will be covered. So you will get one CEU with this.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care.